recording the session. Concerning the field of psychology, we're going to be starting with the first definition, which is the definition of physiological processes. And as I told you before, physiological processes are the normal physical activities such as breathing, sleeping, which take place in any living organisms. We also have covered what's meant by cognitive, which involves conscious intellectual activities such as thinking and reasoning, okay? What is meant by psychology? We said that psychology is the scientific study of behaviors and mental processes, such as which involves both human and animal behaviors. Psychology covers everything that people feel or do, which provide us with something called the insight. And insight means is the act or result of being aware of your inner nature of things. How can psychology provide us with insight? As I told you before, it gives you explanation behind your behaviors. Does psychologists just work randomly? No, they have certain steps in order not to have a false conclusion or in order to avoid the false conclusion. We said that psychologists seek to do 4 things in the scientific and systematic study of humans. First, they describe, explain, predict, and influence. We have covered the describe and explain part last session. We describe the problem while acquiring information about the behavior is being studied or the present known ones, facts. Then we start asking questions about this kind of behavior, which will lead us to explain the reasons behind the problem itself. While we are explaining the reasons, we have 2 things. We have the hypothesis, which is giving us assumptions or predictions about the behavior or the phenomena, which has been tested enough through scientific research, and also will lead us at the end to come up with a theory. And theory is a setup of assumptions used to explain the phenomena that over the scientific, for scientific study. So when we come to a theory, we need to test also the theory to make sure that it is the right theory behind the behavior. So at the beginning, which leads us to the 3rd step for today, is to predict. We keen to predict the results behind this behavior. What will a human or an animal do in this situation? For example, I have Ahmed. Ahmed is going to a party today, and I know from before that Ahmed has a very shy behavior. So I'm predicting what will happen to Ahmed in this party or in this unstructured meeting, because as I told you before, there's no such a shy student. We only have someone who feels comfort in a structured meeting and someone who does not feel comfort in unstructured kinds of groups. For example, Ahmed, as I told you before, Ahmed could be feeling comfortable in a meeting for his friends, for his activity in the school, but he will not feel the same comfort, or he will not feel that he's in the comfort zone while he is in a party, because these unstructured kind of activities make him feel tension or nervous. So we are predicting. The 3rd goal of psychology is to predict what will humans, or at the same time animals or any other creature, will do in different cases or situations, okay, which will lead us to the 4th step. The 4th step for today is to influence. How can we conduct studies with long term of finding out more about the human and animal behavior in order to influence his behavior so he can be acting more positively in the next situation? So again, before I go further with the fluence, we have 4 main steps. We have 4 main steps that psychologists use in order to avoid false conclusion or in order to study a certain type of behavior. The 4 steps are describe, explain, predict, and the last one is to influence. We are going to be influencing the behavior in order to try to change it a little bit. Sometimes psychologists succeed in this, and other times they never succeed. How can we influence these type of behaviors? We have two basic skills. The first one is applying the basic science. What's meant by basic science? The basic science is conducting studies with long-term goal to find more about a human or an animal behavior. This is the basic science. Okay, give me examples. Let's have examples. For example, sometimes we find someone who has a kind of behavior while he is sleeping, his eyes are moving. He have a rapid eye movement in his sleep. Yes, some of us has this. This is the basic science. We are observing someone while he's sleeping, and we are making observation. While making the observation, we have observed that this person is having a rapid eye movement while sleeping. So we start to study it, and this is the basic science. Here comes the role of the psychologists. They come and use what we already know about the people to benefit others using psychological principles to solve more intermediate problems. That's called applied science, which means I come to the person to see what's the reason behind this person having this kind of a rapid eye movement in sleep. Researchers involved with the basic science will observe the rapid eye movement only. But researchers who are considering the applied science will find what makes him uncomfortable or what gives him a sleep disturbance. There is something, maybe he is nervous, maybe he's thinking of something will happen to him tomorrow. That's why he is having a rapid eye movement. So while studying a case or while studying or influencing a behavior, we having two kind of science. We have the basic science, which is a type of studying and observing the behavior, and we have the applied science. After we have studied the behavior and known the reasons behind it, we are trying to help people with the same problem. Okay. Another example for influencing, for example, if I have a toy factory, I'm having a toy factory. Toy manufacturers tend to get psychologists in order to come up with the perfect designs which will appeal to kids. They just don't design any kind of toys. No, they are summoning some of the psychologists in order to help them find or make the perfect design for different toys. This is another example, which is called applied science. We are applying the science in our daily life. Another example, which we have it today also, some researchers have studied the difference between a baby babies who have been raised in their normal houses and other kids or babies who have been raised in orphanages. We find that there is a difference between those babies and other babies. What's the difference? They said that babies who have been raised in orphanages seem to develop their basic skills late than who are or delayed in physical, intellectual, emotional developments more than who are living in their normal houses. Why? If the babies are living in their normal houses, they will find more than be fed. They will be fed, they will be played together. Parents are tending to develop their emotional skills, but this is different from babies who are raised in orphanages. They only living on a crib, watching a white ceiling, and they are doing nothing but eating and sleeping or changed. So those babies who are raised in normal houses, they tend to develop their emotional, their physical, their intellectual skills more quickly than the other babies who are raised in orphanages, which is sometimes we prove it wrong. It's not only about the environment around it, but also it's due to their natural intelligence. So before I go more, with the steps. I just want to make sure that you're understanding. What are the 4 steps of the, who can tell me the four steps of the psychology, or the 4 steps which we use to avoid false conclusion? Huh? Who's following and tell me? Or maybe I start asking myself, what are the 4 steps of avoiding false conclusion in psychology? What do we do? Start raising hands. Okay, I have here Usama Darwish. Usama Darwish. Usama Darwish. Usama Darwish is not here in the session. He's absent. Okay. I have Yahya Awad. Yahya Awad, what are the 4 main steps which psychologists follow in order to avoid false conclusion?
Miss, sorry, the network is poor عندي.
You can't hear the question. I repeat the question again.
No, when you were explaining, I didn't hear clearly.
You didn't hear clearly, okay. Who can answer my question? I have here Tadros. Tadros, go ahead. Tadros?
Yes, miss. Yes, miss.
Can you tell me what are the 4 steps of avoiding or the psychologists follow in order to avoid false conclusion?
Avoid what?
False conclusion. We have 4 main steps that we have been revising since the last session.
اللي هو analyzing. The analyze.
The first, they describe, not analyze. They describe the problem. Yes. Then the
explain.
Explain it. Yes.
And then
predict.
What?
Predict. And influence.
And influence. Okay.
Okay. So again, they are describing, explaining, predicting, and influencing the problem. Okay. Today we are talking about, thank you. Today we are talking about how to influence such behaviors. How can we change it? And we have given 3 examples. I want you to make sure that you are following, because if you're not answering, you will lose marks. Okay? And Yahya, fix your internet problem, because I can see that you have a steady signal.
Okay.
All right. So again, I've given you 3 examples. The 3 examples are, the first one, they have discovered that babies who are raised in normal houses develop their intellectual, mental, emotional skills more rapidly than the babies who are raised in orphanages. Also, we have talking about other examples, which are the toy manufacturers, who tend to bring psychologists in order to apply the applied science to design more appealing toys for kids. Okay, let's move on with the rest of the lesson. What's meant by empirical? Here it is based on observation and experiments. Observations and experiments. Actually, when we are trying to develop our theories, we follow certain steps. Here are the steps. I'm going to be sharing them. The steps we are following are, as you can see in front of you, first the question. After questioning, or the basic scientific steps of psychology, first to question. After questioning, we are moving to the hypothesis. We put some hypotheses. Then we experiment these hypotheses and come up with results. And after we do this, after we experiment the hypothesis and come up with results, we code the conclusions. And the conclusions will go both ways, whether to reject them and revise hypotheses again, whether to reject the conclusions, we figured out that they are not right, or to have additional hypotheses and try to experiment them again. After we find out experimenting and coming to conclusion, we come up with the final one is the theory. So these are the scientific basic of psychology. We just don't go and study a problem without main basic skills. No, we have basic skills which will start to question the behavior, putting some hypotheses, start to experiment these kind of hypotheses. Then we come up with results. These results will give us to the conclusion, and we go with the conclusion whether to reject them and revise again, or to come up with additional hypotheses. Then at the end, we come with the theory of psychology. Okay, here we have the systematic procedures in psychology. What is meant by systematic procedures and research in psychology? These procedures, as I told you before, we have the 6 steps, which is question, hypothesis, experiment, result, conclusion, and theory. We tend to, at the beginning, we tend to make a structure to follow in order to study these cases. But how are we going to question or to make the structure? While asking questions, and we ask the questions to collect data, like using experiments, using questionnaire, using case study. These are the ways we are going to be collecting information. Then we are structuring our way of studying the case. So here, as a structuralists, we are interested in the basic elements of human experiment. We are developing a way of self-observation. Before we come into these kind of steps, at the beginning, they used to self-watch others. Yeah. For example, if I am going to be studying a behavior, I make self-observation. I make for myself self-observation, which is called introspection. Introspections are self-observation. I'm observing myself for a behavior, and I'm writing the conclusion for it. But actually, they have discovered that it's not accurate, because if you are watching yourself or observing yourself, you're not going to be fair with yourself. You're not going to be objective. So maybe you give the wrong conclusions. That's why they have changed their pattern in order to find a better theory, and they have followed the steps, the right steps. The last question for today, why we study psychology? Why we study, or why do we study psychology? We study psychology for different or for many reasons. The first one is psychology is connected both to our social science or economics or natural science, such as biology and chemistry, and social science, such as science. Yani, psychology is related to every science we are studying in life. That's why we study psychology, because it is related to every aspect or connected to both the social science, such as history and economics, and the natural science, such as biology and chemistry. Yani, if we are studying psychology, we'll be able to tell about several incidents that happened in history or economics. For example, why does this country behaved in this situation? Why in history this king have built this pyramid, for example? These have psychological reasons. And also to relate it to biology and chemistry at the same time. Why my body is reacting this way? It is reacting this way because we have biological reasons. This is one way. The second reason Psychology explores influences of society and on individual behavior and group relationship. Yes, when we are studying psychology, we're going to be able to tell what kind of influence of society on individuals. How does the society can affect us alone or us in groups. So psychology will be able to tell how we are affected in our group relationship or alone. Also, it looks for the biological explanation for behavior. Yes, when sometimes, as I told you before, I have a headache and there is no evident reason, there is no clear reason for it, I look for psychological reasons. Maybe I am nervous, maybe I'm facing a problem, and this could affect my health or affect me in a biological way. Also, psychology will give you the way to think like a scientist. Yeah, if you are following these steps, to question, to put hypothesis, to experiment, to come to results and conclusion, and at the end, we are coming up with a theory, it helps us to think like a scientist. It helps us to think like a scientist, to question, to put assumptions, to try to test this assumption, to find alternative evidences, to come up with conclusion. This is a scientific way of thinking. This is a scientific way of thinking.
Miss
Yes.
حضرتك خدتي الاتندنس؟
Who's talking? Who's speaking?
حلا.
Hala, yes, I've taken the attendance. And Hala, again, we don't speak in Arabic in the session.
Okay, I had a problem with the internet, so I just entered the session.
You and Noreen also?
Yes.
So Hala, she just entered. Noreen, are you following? Noreen Abbas.
Miss, also me, I was late because the internet.
The name, please.
Mariam al-Naqib.
Yes, Mariam al-Naqib, you just entered. I can see you. So I have Hala and I have Mariam. Noreen is not responding, and when I called her name, she didn't answer too. Maybe she's not attending. Okay. Let's continue the rest of the lesson. So here, the last question for you. Why do we study psychology? We study psychology for different reasons. First, to connect them both to social science, such as history and economics, and also to the natural science as biology. The second reason, psychology explores the influence of society on individual behavior and group relationship. It gives us the reasons behind our group behaviors and also the group relationship, the relationship between group members. Psychology will give you the time to also find out the biological explanation for your behavior, why you are behaving like this, okay? At the end, psychology also gives you the chance in order to think like a scientist, So here, this is the end of the lesson. Anyone wants to ask a question about the lesson?
Thank you, Miss.
Thank you, Miss.
You have no questions? Are you sure?
Thank you, Miss.
No. Thank you.
Miss.
So this is my role to start asking questions if you have no questions. Why do we study psychology? Why do we study psychology? Ali Gizi, because you said thank you, Miss. Why do we study psychology, Ali?
Why do we study psychology?
Why do we study psychology? Yeah.
To help you understand yourself and other people by learning about human behavior that will help you in your life. Interactions, learning performance, ability to cope with pressure. كده يعني.
Yes, you have a reason. Some of the reasons is to help you to understand yourself and your behavior. Thank you, Ali. Other reasons, it helps you also to think like who can tell me?
Like a scientist.
Like a scientist, yeah. It helps you to think like a scientist. which using the basic steps of science. Also, it gives you an explanation behind your biological behaviors, why you're having these symptoms, because you are nervous or you really have a health problem. This is why we study psychology. And also we have the basic steps of studying psychology, which are to question, put hypothesis, experiment, result, conclusion, and come up with the theory at the end. Okay? At the end, the last question for you guys. Your homework at the beginning, because we have finished the lesson, you will have a research from 30 to 40 lines, okay? How do we apply the study of psychology to our life? How do we apply the study of psychology to our daily life? How is it applied? I've given you many examples, such as the toy factory, who is bringing psychologists in order to design toys that could be appealing to kids. Also to study the difference between babies who are being brought in their original homes or in the orphanage. Or also, I've given you another example, is to explain the reasons behind the rapid eye movement, which is a psychological reason, or is it coming from physiological reason? So what I want from you is a research of 30 to 40 lines about how can we relate or use psychology in our daily life. How can we relate it? How can we benefit from it in our daily life? Mentioning one problem that could have been appealing as a physiological problem, but it is actually a psychological problem. You can relate your own life. Maybe you have an exam, you are nervous, you find out that you are having a headache or a stomachache or whatever, and you find out this is because of a psychological reason. This is the very easy example, but I want more complicated problems. Relate this to your own life. Do you understand the assignment? Do you understand the assignment?
Yes.
Okay. What I want from you, one of you, please, can you make a messenger group and add everybody in order so we can contact? Who will be responsible for making the messenger group and add me to it? Someone volunteer. Nobody?
I can, yes.
Knuz, thank you, Knuz. Please make us a messenger group, add everybody to it so I can put if you need to any explanation, ask about anything, we can be contacting through the group. Assignment is due to the end of the week. It's due to Saturday night. Saturday night, I'll be receiving the researches, okay? You can send it to the WhatsApp group or you can upload it to the Smart Schools. You have both ways, okay? I'm waiting for the assignment by the end of the week, Saturday before 12. Saturday before 12. Anyone wants to ask any question before I end the session?
Thank you, Miss.
You're welcome. Yalla, see you next time. See you at school بقى next week إن شاء الله.
إن شاء الله. إن
Miss,
شاء الله.
Yes, Noreen.
معلش بس أنا ما كنتش سامعة حضرتك وبتناديني.
Why? You were muting?
إيه؟
Was it mute?
مش عارفة أنا ما كنتش سامعة.
Okay, no problem, Noreen. We'll see about it next time إن شاء الله. يلا, see you at school next
Okay.
time. Bye bye.
ماشي باي.